Hi, good morning. Let's review just a little bit about what we've been talking about, especially like about galaxies. What is a galaxy? A large collection or cluster of stars, dust, and gas held together by a force called gravity, separated from other star systems by a vast amount of space. The name of the galaxy in which our solar system is found is called the Milky Way. Remember, we do not have an actual photograph of the Milky Way because no human or man-made spacecraft has ever left our galaxy to take a picture of it. The closest spiral galaxy to the Milky Way is the Andromeda galaxy, and we do have good photographs of that entire galaxy. The universe is a vast space larger than we can really even imagine, but today we're going to be learning more about some of the stars that we can see when we look into our own night sky, when we look up into the galaxy, our Milky Way. Every star, well, I think every star in our Milky Way has a name, if people have been able to look up and see it. Have you ever gone outside at night to look up and see the night sky? Have you ever played connect the dots up there and with your mind's eye and said, oh, I see a figure of a fill in the blank? There are lots of people who've been doing that for thousands and thousands of years, and all of the stars are named. I don't know if ancient people knew that some of the stars that they were seeing were actually galaxies, but they're all named, which I think is so interesting. And have you ever noticed when you look at a very hot flame, maybe on a gas stove or some other fire, that different parts of the flame have different colors? There's blue and white parts of the flame are much hotter than the yellow or red parts. It's the same thing for stars. Blue and bluish white stars are the hottest. White stars are still very hot. Yellow stars like our sun is a medium hot star, and red stars are the least hot. It doesn't mean they're not hot, but for a star, they are the least hot. There are some very interesting, stars that you would be able to find if you went outside on a very dark night that was very clear. You'd be able to find a large white star called Sirius. It is the very brightest star in our sky. There's a red star. It's one of the closest to us. It's called Betelgeuse. You ever heard of that? This star is one of the brightest in the sky because it is not only very large, but it's pretty close to us in astronomical distances. Betelgeuse is red because it's not a very hot star anymore. Betelgeuse is a dying star that is starting to cool off. Astronomers predict that at some point, Betelgeuse will eventually explode, and that explosion will turn it back into a super hot, bright area of gas that we will be able to see from Earth even during the daylight. Some stars become hotter again once they die and explode or implode. And then there is a bluish white star. It's called Rigel. It too is a very big star. And then because of its size and very hot temperature, it's one of the stars, one of the night sky's brightest stars, and that there's a blue star called Bellatrix. It's one of the very hottest stars. So let's learn a little bit more about stars and constellations. We're going to head back to planet Earth, and from our home, we can see glimpses of space by looking up into the sky. After our journey, perhaps you won't see the stars as just little twinkling lights in the sky anymore. You now know that they're like our sun, the star that is in the very center of our solar system. You know that up close, stars are really massive powerhouses of super hot gas. The next time you stand looking up into the night sky, perhaps you will study the stars in a new way. They all look about the same size from where you stand on Earth, but you know that they are not the same size. They are different sizes. Some are brighter than others, some are hotter than others. Maybe you once thought that the stars in the sky were pretty close together. But after taking a ride in our special classroom spaceship, you remember that even though the stars look close together in the sky, they're very, very, very far apart. It's true that stars cluster together to form galaxies. Even when they're clustered together, most stars are still incredibly far apart from other stars in the same galaxy. And they're even farther apart from the stars of other galaxies. There's a lot of space in space. If you look up into the sky and try to count the stars, there are a lot of them. On a clear evening, depending on where you are, you can see many of the 2,000 or so stars that can be seen from Earth with the naked eye. All the stars you see are in our Milky Way galaxy. You can't see individual stars from other galaxies without the use of a telescope. But looking between the stars of our galaxy, you may be able to see the distant Andromeda galaxy if it's a very dark night and you know just where to look. For thousands and thousands and thousands of years, people have been looking up at the night sky just like you. Human beings have tried to understand the location of the stars and predict their positions each night in the sky. And in the grand scheme of the universe, it is human nature for us to try to understand why things are the way they are and where we fit in. Since ancient times, people have grouped the stars into patterns. We call these patterns constellations. Ancient civilizations saw these constellations as figures of people and animals and objects. They played connect the dots with the stars by drawing imaginary lines between them to form pictures in the sky. These pictures often told familiar mythological stories about heroes like the Greek hunter Orion, who stands ready with his shield to fight a bull. And they are about mythological animals like Pegasus, the beautiful winged horse. They're about animals such as Canis Major and Canis Minor. Canis means dog in Latin, and Major means greater. If Canis Major is commonly known as the great dog, it's easy to see who might be following behind. In the stories about Orion, the great hunter, these two constellations are Orion's faithful hunting dogs, forever following at the heels of their master as they move through the night sky. The very brightest star in our sky, Sirius, is in the constellation Canis Major and is often called the dog star. Sirius is a very large star compared to our sun and one of the closest stars to our solar system, only a little over 8.5 light years away. So here's Canis Major, and that would be Sirius. People who live in Earth's northern hemisphere see a different set of constellations than people in Earth's southern hemisphere do. Those constellations above Earth's north pole can be seen by people in the northern hemisphere. Those above Earth's south pole can only be seen by people in the southern hemisphere. However, the constellations above the Earth's equator can be seen by both hemispheres. Maybe someday you'll cross the equator, travel to another part of the world, and experience the constellations of the night sky from a different point of view. Haven't done it yet, would love to. Since ancient times, people have noticed that the stars in the sky and the familiar constellations move in a really predictable and interesting way. All of the stars in the sky move in a circular pattern around one point. In the northern hemisphere, the half of planet Earth north of the equator, there is a star located very near that point in the sky that we call the North Star or Polaris. Even though all the rest of the stars in the sky change their positions throughout the night, the North Star is always located almost directly north. And there's Polaris. Knowing this has helped sailors and travelers in the northern hemisphere for thousands of years to orient themselves. Long before modern navigational tools like compasses and GPS were invented, sailors relied on the star Polaris. Technology has advanced a great deal since those days, so much so that people like to participate in a modern sporting competition known as Orienteering, where they use magnetic compasses and GPS to orient themselves and accomplish a task or goal. You might remember from an earlier lesson that the Earth has a North Pole and a South Pole. These poles act like a magnet. A magnetic compass works because of the Earth's magnetic field. A GPS is a modern device that uses man-made satellites orbiting the Earth to find and tell your position on Earth. Two patterns of stars you may already be familiar with are visible in the northern hemisphere are the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. Each looks like a ladle in the sky. The Big Dipper and the Little Dipper are not the official names of the constellations themselves, but are part of two very famous larger constellations. The Big Dipper is a group of stars that is part of a constellation, Ursa Major, which means Greater Bear. And the Little Dipper is a smaller group of stars that is part of the constellation, Ursa Minor. Suppose it is a dark, starry night and you're trying to find your way through the countryside. You can look up into the night sky and find the Little Dipper. Here's the Little Dipper. The last star on the handle is the brightest star in the constellation. You just heard about the star. It's named Polaris. It's called Polaris because it's almost directly above the Earth's North Pole. Once you find Polaris, you can find north by simply facing this star. When you're facing north, then your back is to the south, your right side is to the east, and your left side is to the west, and all you have to do is decide which direction to go. Sometimes the Big Dipper is easier to see than the Little Dipper. And you can also use the Big Dipper to find the North Star. Just line up the two stars opposite the handle of the Big Dipper's bowl and draw a line through them. The line points up out of the bowl of the Big Dipper right to the North Star on the tip of the Little Dipper's handle. And if you've got the North Star, Polaris, you can point yourself in the right direction. Who needs a GPS? People have been using the stars to navigate or find their way for thousands and thousands of years. People who live in the northern hemisphere today can still see these and other constellations when they look up at the night sky. Runaway slaves, people who were enslaved, have been, before the time of the U.S. Civil War, saw that ladle in the sky and sang a song telling them to follow the drinking gourd north to freedom. Do you remember that? Enslaved people have been using that for a long time. Throughout history, people in different cultures have looked up to the Big Dipper and seen other pictures besides the famous water dipper. In one Greek myth or story, the Ursa Major, the jealous goddess Hera, wife of Zeus, turns a maiden named Callisto into a bear. And then, to protect Callisto the bear, Zeus places her in the sky as a constellation. An Arabian myth describes a coffin that's followed by three mourners. One Native American group saw a bear being followed by three hunters, one of them carrying a pan in which to cook the bear meat. The Norse people of Northern Europe saw Odin's wagon. But what do you see if you live in the Southern Hemisphere? People who live south of the equator in places like Chile, South Africa, and Australia see a different set of constellations than people in the Northern Hemisphere in places like the United States, Canada, Norway, Turkey, and China. On the other side of the world, as they rotate around the South Pole, people look out into the stars of the Milky Way galaxy from a different position than people north of the equator do. You might be surprised to learn that there's no star directly over the South Pole. There is no South Star around which the rest of the stars circle. But there is a small constellation named Octans, very close by, which circles around the spot where a South Star would be if it was one. Octans resembles an octant, an early instrument used for navigation. Not far away is another constellation familiar to stargazers in the Southern Hemisphere. It's called the Southern Cross. How many of these constellations have you seen in the night sky? The constellations you've heard about today are just a few of the 88 constellations astronomers have identified in Earth's skies. Next time you have a chance to enjoy a dark, starlit night, gaze up into the sky and see if you can find some familiar constellations. If not, have some fun and make up some constellations and stories of your own. Maybe someday you'll cross the equator, travel to another part of the world, and experience the constellations of the night sky from another point of view. I want to do that. So, what are some of the constellations and star patterns that you've heard about? Orion, Canis Major, the big dog, Canis Minor, the little dog, Little Dipper, Big Dipper, Pegasus, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, Octans, and the Southern Cross. What do we call the North Star in the Northern Hemisphere that really never seems to move? We call it Polaris. It's always found as close to straight above north as we can have. It's sort of amazing. What point of view on Earth affects what you see in the sky? Well, the different hemispheres of the Earth. If you were to cut the Earth in half around the equator, you'd have a northern hemisphere and a southern hemisphere. We know that the sun is a star and appears very bright to us. Why is the sun not part of any constellation that we see in the night sky? Well, the sun is too bright for us to be able to see other stars in the sky at the same time. When we are looking at the stars in the night sky, the sun is on the other side of the planet Earth. What are some characteristics of stars that you heard about in this read aloud? Stars are different colors depending on how hot they are. Stars are at different distances from Earth. Some stars appear brighter than others depending on the size and distance from Earth. And even some of them may not actually be stars. They may be entire galaxies that we are seeing that look like a star from our point of view. What's the difference described in the read aloud among blue, white, red, and yellow stars? Blue stars are the hottest, white stars are very hot, yellow stars are medium hot, and red stars are the least hot. So what does that tell you about our sun? Well, our sun, being a yellow star, is a medium hot star. Some stars are hotter, some stars are not as hot as our sun. Thank you so much. Have a great day.